Hey guys, Peter von Panda here. I'm at Pearl Harbor and I'm really excited about checking out everything it has to offer. Let's go take a look. On the way to Ford Island, you can see the USS Arizona Memorial, but you can't go on there anymore due to cracks in the foundation, which is disappointing. The USS Arizona battleship sunk in the Pearl Harbor raid is actually sitting bow to bow with USS Missouri, which is where we're going. Here at USS Missouri battleship. Let's go check it out. The USS Missouri, or the Big Mo, is an Iowa-class battleship that is now a museum at Pearl Harbor. It actually wasn't destroyed in the attack on Pearl Harbor because it was actually under construction in 1941 and didn't enter service until 1944, and then served in World War II. Now, what I think is really interesting is the history. So the ship was decommissioned in 1955, which is kind of amazing, and then actually reactivated and modernized in 1984, and then served through Operation Desert Storm and the Gulf Wars in the 90s. And then it was decommissioned and then turned into a museum. Now, after you pay admission to get onto the USS Missouri, I would recommend taking the free guided tour. It only goes around the deck and is actually pretty short. There's a pay tour apparently that takes you on kind of the bowels of the ship too. But the free tour was pretty amazing. It kind of tells you about the history of the Missouri. The tour actually starts on the bow of the ship overlooking the Arizona, where they explain also the very large cannons on the front, and then it takes you around to the side of the ship where the Missouri was actually the location for the signing of the surrender of Japan to end World War II. There's a marker on the deck showing where the surrender was actually signed. There are also replicas of the surrender documents on display. As I mentioned, the Missouri overlooks the USS Arizona Memorial, and they sit bow to bow, I believe. What you can see actually from the Arizona Memorial drifting down the right side of the boat is the oil that is still continuing to leak from the USS Arizona. That was quite visible on the day that I was there, and actually creates a very long trail kind of going out of the harbor. From the upper deck of the Missouri, you get a really good view of Pearl Harbor, including all the ships and docks. And because it was rim-packed, there were a lot of international ships, including the submarine, which someone mentioned that they thought was Australian. You're free to roam around the ship, and one of the most interesting things to me was going over to the big gun turrets and peeking your head up inside the entrance at the back of them. Given the massive amounts of gunpowder used to launch the huge shells, I can't imagine that this was a very comfortable place or a very pleasurable job to have. If you make your way to the aft of the ship, you'll actually see an area of the deck that's very flat and that they have it's set up for ceremonies and special occasions. There's a lot of military ceremonies going on throughout the day there, but it's actually where you go down the stairs into the lower levels as well. Here they have a very elaborate exhibit set up showing you not only the history of World War II, but a lot of information about the Japanese kamikaze pilot that actually struck the Missouri. His body was actually recovered on the ship and was granted a burial at sea. Some of his belongings are on display. They actually have a model of the kamikaze hit on display, and there's still a dent in the side of the boat where the kamikaze hit and that was never fully repaired, and in fact, it's really hard to see from the deck of the ship. Now, because Hawaii gets a lot of Japanese tourists and a lot of them go to Pearl Harbor and go to these exhibits, I was curious how World War II would be presented, and I thought they did a fantastic job at this memorial of really giving credit to the commitment of the Japanese soldiers and airmen and seamen, as well as painting the war in kind of a very neutral light, certainly showing respect to kind of all the parties involved. The rest of the boat is actually really interesting. Now, you got to remember that this World War II era boat was updated for the Gulf War, and so a lot of the things, including the racks, are probably much larger than they were on the World War II version of this boat. Nonetheless, they were quite small still, and a lot of people commented how inhumane they thought some of these accommodations were. Not only does the USS Missouri carry a lot of history with it from World War II, but to more modern conflicts like the Gulf War. In fact, as we get further and further from World War II and lose a lot of our veterans and those storytellers, I think the USS Missouri and similar memorials are a really important piece of our history, not only to visit, but to remember and honor those that served and sacrificed for freedom and for our country.